What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a brand new winning edition of Sandro Mamukelashvili Sports Programming Network. Oh my goodness, what a game from Mamu, Ethan. Obviously, I texted you before this game. Honestly, even without Jalen Brunson, I was expecting this to be a blowout. And while there definitely were some peaks and valleys that we'll get into this game, man, I texted you after the game. This really feels like the best game of the season for me, just because of how fulfilling it was for the team, the camaraderie that you saw from everybody, whether it was Blake making plays, you saw Blake going crazy on the bench for Mamu, with Mamu doing the insane stuff that he did in only like 16 or 17 minutes tonight. On top of CP3 was going off early, Harrison was going off early. There were a ton of great moments in this game, but I'll just ditch it to you, man. Those are kind of my little overall tidbits there. What's your takeaways?
Man, I mean, we can get into the nitty gritty. Like everyone played well, to be completely frank and honest. And the lineup going small ball with Jeremy Sohan at center. At first, I was a little scared, like this is not going to work because
Mm-hmm.
Cat was amazing in that first half prior to that hand injury. But this is all about Mamukelashvili. This was his moment. We always make fun of the fact that he plays out of his mind coming down the
Right.
stretch of these seasons, and we think, okay, he's got himself a spot in the rotation next year, but then he just can't break in. This is exactly like what he's capable of at his
Mm-hmm.
best in 19 minutes with 34, 9, and 3 assists. And only missed one shot, 13 for 14, hit 7 threes. He was on fire the entire time. And really, probably the biggest, I know it kind of goes without saying because of the stats, but definitely the biggest reason that we were able to win this game, especially in the second half, where it looked like the Knicks were about to come back. I think they cut it down to 8 in that third quarter. But Mamu and the rest of that bench mob, they were able to push us through with the crazy run that he had.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Even in early in the game, in the second quarter, well, obviously, the Spurs dominated the second quarter, but for a little bit at the beginning, it got a close. It got close before they went on their run, and Mamu and Blake were influential there. I could be misremembering that actually, but the point is, in the second quarter, when the Spurs were having a ton of success, as you see up there, 38-23, Mamu and Blake were an integral part of that, as well as the second half, like you mentioned. Dan Weiss mentioned that in the post-game interview with Mamu, where he said, the Knicks were able to cut it to 8 a couple times. Like I mentioned, the peaks and valleys at the beginning of the game. Like there were so many different times I wrote down, oh, here's where we give up the lead. Here's where we blow it, despite the big, halftime lead. And we were able to keep our composure and fend it off. And a lot of that was because in those moments, we were able to just run a Mamu pick and pop, and he was 7 for 7 tonight.
I mean, that really was the offense, and give credit where credit is due. We continued to go to that, and the Knicks just they never adjusted to it. They kept playing drop coverage against Mamu, and he was able to knock it down over and over and over again. And then even when they finally decided to contest that shot, he
Mm-hmm.
was smart enough to make the right play. He made that pass to Jeremy Sohan for an easy dunk.
Mm-hmm.
He gave up the rock toward the very end when he got that backdoor cut from CP to actually dunk and get to that 34-point mark. So I mean, he incredible high IQ plays from Mamu. I think this is definitely what he's capable of, but it's very rare that he shoots with this level of efficiency. That was the difference, obviously. He was just flaming.
Yeah, so just to kind of get into the Mamu conversation, because obviously this is just one game. And like you mentioned, we've seen moments like this over the past 2 seasons in two specific Nuggets games where Mamu's been able to kind of take over and hit shots even on Nikola Jokic over the past 2 seasons. And like you said, we kind of took those moments. It's like, okay, that's kind of garbage time at the end of the year. And this is kind of a similar situation, but it was also just completely different in the sense of how he shot. But I mean, 34 and 9 in
hmm
19 minutes, on top of the efficiency. I'm trying to word this in a way that, like, I don't want to be too hyperbolic about just one game. But, even before this, Ethan, last episode, we were mentioning we want Mamu. We would be down with Mamu coming back as a third string four. Obviously, this is just one game, but here's what I'll say now. And you could go in the comments and be like, you're overreacting to one game. But at this point, I don't really care. That's kind of over 3 different seasons where we've seen this from Mamu late in the year. And here's what I'd say. I'm down to not only just bring him as the backup or as the third string four, but I'm down with letting him compete with somebody as the backup four as well. And obviously that gets into rotational conversations because if we're playing Jeremy and Harrison at the 4, then, where does that leave Mamu? But that could get into a whole different discussion. This week, I kind of looked at the free agency and what our roster looks like right now. And there's definitely a world where you can move Harrison to the 3 and he can be in the rotation with Keldon as kind of our 2-3s. And then you have Julian as your third string 3. And that's kind of what it was at the beginning of the year when we were starting Jeremy and Harrison, where Jeremy was at the 4 next to Wemby. So with all of that being said there, I think that there could be an opening for Mamu in the backup 4 position moving forward. But also, with that being said, I'm not opposed to also bringing in somebody through free agency or the draft at that 4 position. But I think my main takeaway from this is I want to extend Mamu tonight. And I'm not saying I want to pay him our entire salary, but I think the culture, the cohesion, like at the end of the day, even if he just ends up being like somebody like this, he fits the Spurs so much, man. Not just because he's Georgian, but also with his play style. And you can see how much his teammates love him too. And that was the case when he was in Milwaukee as well.
Yeah, I'm completely behind giving him more meaningful minutes. Like I really have been for that. Yeah, I've been for that since the beginning of the season. It's just been really difficult for him to get consistent minutes, which is kind of baffling to me. Like I know he's not going to do this every night, but I always feel like Mamu comes in and provides us much needed energy. Even if his shot isn't falling, he makes high IQ plays, makes the right pass, doesn't get in anybody's way. I know defensively, I guess, is his biggest liability, but he is a 4. He is a 4,
Yes,
and we
yes.
don't have a backup 5. So I also think that has kind of limited his ability to be successful. But tonight he played backup 4/5 at times with next to Jeremy, next to Bismack. I think the bench unit needs a lot of praise, and honestly, so does the starting unit. Jeremy Sohan, Harrison Barnes, Mamu, Champagny, KJ, Blake, Devin, all of these guys were really fighting for rebounds, and we were playing gang rebounds, and all of us were being very physical and aggressive at the basketball. And I think that allowed us to kind of play with more energy, play with pace, because we were without a big other than Bismack, who I think played well. But it really was a team effort to kind of get to that point. Because usually it feels like, in past games, like Mamu's our center, so Mamu's the guy that we're going to blame for all of
Mhm.
this, and he's going to be singled out because he's getting boxed out by bigger guys. But tonight it was definitely a team effort. I know that was a long-winded way of saying,
No, you're
yes,
good.
I agree with what you said. He deserves more meaningful minutes because I feel like when he's played poorly, it was more so due to the circumstance rather than just his individual performance.
That was exactly what I was going to say. When you were talking, I was thinking, well, here's the difference. The reason why probably Mamu didn't look as good early in the season and when we played him at the 4 is because he was playing next to Zach Collins. And that's no disrespect to Zach, who now in Chicago is putting up better numbers, at least in the first couple games. I haven't checked in a while. Obviously, the fit just didn't work out there. But like you mentioned, with him being a 4 and then the physicality issues that we had with Zach when he was on the floor,
Yep.
I think that, I don't know if mitigated is the right word, but that decreased his impact because he didn't have a true 5 next to him. So I think
Right.
that's a really good point. I understand if someone wants to come in here and be like, this only happens in garbage time. I just don't have faith in it. But I think if you watch the game tonight, you'd feel different. I just straight up, man. I think even Knicks fans were probably like, as much as, they were probably like, who is this random going off? Like,
Mhm.
still, even they were probably like, okay, well, this dude has something. And, there's a reason why Coach Bud and a Giannis team picked him up. I know he didn't have a
Mhm.
huge role on that team, but I think there's a reason he's stuck around the league for as long as he has. And again, like I said, last episode we mentioned that we would be cool with bringing him back, and now after seeing this, I don't even care how the rest of the season goes. I just want to bring him back, dude. This
Mhm.
performance is enough, dude. Wemby is somewhere calling him an alien.
Yeah, no, this will begin the rafters for the rest of our lives in terms of like one of the most memorable Spurs games of my lifetime. Shout out Mamu Kelashvili.